Welcome to Faith in 5, a weekly video devotional designed to discuss practical spiritual concepts in 5 minutes or less. I'm your host, Mark Vandella. I've been hanging out with my 3-year-old nephew, Graham, a lot lately, and while it's a ton of fun, he's a blast, and we like to wrestle and fish and basically just play a whole bunch of make-believe stuff. What I've learned is that he has 2 favorite words. One is why, and the other is but. And if you're a parent or you are an aunt or uncle to a 3 to 5-year-old, you know that this is pretty common, that when you ask them, you tell them something or you ask them to do something, the first question is why, and then you explain, and if they don't like it, then it's like, but, right? And I don't want to offend anybody, but I think we behave the same way in our faith. When Jesus asks something of us, we say, why? Why would I do that? Why would I have to do that? And then if he says, because XYZ, we often respond with, but what about that person? Or what about, but doesn't that kind of exclude that? Or do I get out a pass or a get out of jail free card here? But why? Over and over and over in our faith. And honestly, we make our faith way more complicated than it needs to be. See, when we are asked to do something that requires something of us, oftentimes we ask that why question. It's usually the response we give when Jesus asks something of us. We need to give of our time, we need to serve, or we need to give of our money, or we should do something, shouldn't do something. When it's applied to our lives, we often ask why. But when Jesus asks us to do something in the lives of others, we usually use the word but. But what about this? But haven't they done? But do they deserve it? All of those sorts of things. So internally, we ask why when it's something of us. When it's something of others, we ask but. And there's a Bible verse that I think kind of sits in the middle of these two things. It takes into account the us, and it takes into account the them. It's 1 Corinthians 15:10. And in this verse, it says, by the grace of God, I am what I am. So at this point, we're kind of recognizing, or we're asked to recognize, that we're being asked to do something for us, give, serve, whatever that looks like, because God first gave us something. And so it's not too much to ask. Just like a 3-year-old, a parent, I birthed you, so if I ask you to go clean your room, it's not the end of the world. Don't ask why, just go do it. Right? So in our own lives, we have to realize that God did something amazing in us, for us, and we are what we are because of that. But this verse goes on to say that it's by his grace, right? I am what I am. It's by his grace to me. It is by his grace to me, not without effect. So because of this, that means I need to respond differently, both internally, when God asks something of us, but also externally. It says, I've worked harder than everyone else. This is that moment of but. We have an opportunity to say, but I deserve it and they don't. I've worked harder than all the others, but it doesn't stop there. The final sentence says, yet not I, but the grace of God that was within me. And so when we're thinking about the internal stuff, hey, go do this, it makes life better, trust me on this, instead of asking why, let's just try to take a step in that direction and do it. And when God says to do something to others, we don't have to compare ourselves and say, but I worked harder, or I earned it, or I deserved it, because ultimately we don't deserve grace. And neither do other people. But God still asks us. We don't need to say, but what about? It's not about that. It doesn't matter how hard you worked or how clean you live or all those sorts of things. This verse really sums it up well. Because of God, we should respond differently because of his grace for us. See, as adults, we often try to intellectually count the cost. the return on investment. What is it going to cost us? All of these sorts of things. And most of the time, if you're anything like me, we ask the question, what is it going to cost me? But if we, in our faith journey, as we interact with God in our own lives and we interact with God in his people, what if we change the question that we asked? What if we ask, what is it going to cost if I don't do this? In his book, Everybody Always, Bob Goff quotes two people that I actually like to follow, I like to read. One is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which is a little bit more intellectual, and it's very, his book, The Cost of Discipleship, is written for insiders. It's written for me, somebody who already has faith, who already believes that Jesus died for me. And in it, Bob says that Dietrich says, we make grace cost too little. So in our own lives, we aren't as aware of what that grace means to us and what it does in our lives, and that should cause us to act, like 1 Corinthians 15:10 suggests. And then Bob quotes Mike Foster, who wrote a great book called People of a Second Chance, which is really written from the perspective of including others and helping others meet a relationally loving God. And Mike Foster says, we make grace cost too much. So in our faith journey, what if it's both? What if we took the time to say, when it has to do with us, when we have those why answers, the why is simple. It's because Jesus died for you. We need to make grace cost a little more so that we don't ask those questions, would God ask something of us? But when it comes to other people and loving them and showing them Jesus, we should make grace cost a little less. People don't need to measure up. They don't need to earn it. It's very clear throughout the whole story of the Bible. And that verse lays that out well for us. So the challenge is, how do we do this in the coming week? In our own lives, how do we take action as if grace costs so much for us and we carry that around? How also do we take action in the lives of others and expose them to grace that is so abundantly available and free to them? Don't ask, what is this going to cost me if I do? Ask, what is it going to cost if I don't?